business mastery for startups, scale-ups, small businesses here at Boston Startups, magnificent Boston Startup Week hosted at Suffolk University. So to everyone attending, thank you very much. But mostly, I'd like to thank Chuck. Chuck, I did not catch the name of your company.
Oh, it's MCG Partners.
Chuck from MCG Partners, who is a leadership master and here to talk to us not only about his journey, but also about what it takes to lead in a startup and how to succeed in this crazy business.
I'm happy to be here, Jerry. Thanks for having me. There goes the echo here in the lobby.
Yes, for those of you who aren't here watching us, we're live in the lobby of Suffolk University's Law School. So if the acoustics are a bit odd in the recording out there in the audience, I apologize. So Chuck, you have had a storied career. So in related news, Chuck and I are both authors, and prior to recording this episode, we were upstairs in the authors area, and our tables were adjoined. And Chuck had shared he's been doing this for 40 years, so I'm sure an enormous amount to talk about. But why don't we start with your background and your book, and then we'll roll into.
Sure. Yeah, so I've been in management consulting most of my career. Did everything from process engineering initially to strategy consulting to change management. I like to experiment. It's just my personality. I get bored a little easily.
Yes.
And then I got into leadership development, talent management space about 25 years ago, and I stayed there. So what happens in a lot of professions, you kind of scale in terms of responsibility and advance and manage projects, manage teams, manage practices. That's what I ended up doing. And I was fortunate enough to become the CEO of a global consulting firm. We grew that exponentially for about 5 years. And then in 2006, we got acquired twice in 1 year. So that was a pretty stressful, intense year. We were owned by a holding company, went through 2 acquisitions, integrations. And I was frankly burnt out as now part of this huge conglomerate. And I really missed sort of the entrepreneurial, nimble environment, having built practices in the past. So I never built my own company, but I've done it for other people over my career. So I kind of decided it's time for me to start my own firm. So I started MCG Partners in 2007, which is 17 years ago. And in that decision, I also decided to become an executive coach and advisor to executives and executive teams. So I kind of wear multiple hats. As you know, I wrote that book a couple of years ago. But I also have a great team of 40 people. We're headquartered here in Greater Boston. We work with startups all the way up through the Fortune 500 in every industry. So I'm very passionate about this space, and one of the reasons why I wrote a leadership book, which is called The Rise of the Agile Leader, Can You Make the Shift?
Absolutely, and I want to talk more about that, but you've got a lot of meat on the bone of your background. So one of the things that you said that really stuck out to me, I'm a small business guy. I've worked in large business and quite obviously respect it, but it's not for me. And the irony, my biggest success as a founding team member was Apicero. And as exciting as it sounds to grow a company of 2,500 people from scratch, it was at the latter end of that I stopped enjoying it.
Right.
The company was too big. Not my makeup. And I very similarly, that's why I started Redbeard Solutions, to move back to a smaller firm and start being me again and not a master of processes.
Yeah, but I think the point you're making here, and I think this is for anyone that's listening to this or anyone that's here at this conference all week, which is, by the way, outstanding conference here at Suffolk University. Not everyone is wired to work in a startup. And so you really have to, depending where you are in your journey, in your life, in your career, those are all factors. I mean, if anything, ironically, I probably would advise most people to get corporate experience.
Yes.
You get exposed to best practices. You get mentorship. You get some really great experience and development. But there are some people, especially early in their career, that just really want to get into a startup or start up a business. So you have to really kind of understand yourself and your passion and listen to really what's going to be important for you, because we are all wired differently, right? So understanding, not just our personality, our behaviors, but really what motivates and drives us is a really big, really, really important factor to that.
Couldn't agree more. And you said 2 things there I'd like to expand on.
Sure.
As well. One is the culture piece, which is a sweet spot for both of us. It's a big part of what both of us do. And that cultural part, there's people that are wired for the startup world. They like the excitement. They like the energy. They like the almost frenetic pace and the chaos. And then there's those that seem to be wired for the Fortune 500 world, that they like the order, the structure. And that's what I like about startups is that kind of, you don't know what new adventure is awaiting you that day, versus in the larger corporations, again, every day has got shocking similarities to the ones before. And taking the time to go work in a company, not only will it show you which of those people you are, but, and again, we're going to be all over the place, I think, because of our backgrounds. I've found that in the 93% of startups that fail, a recurring theme that I see again and again and again is that the founder or founding team lack the fundamental building block basics of business. And spending time in a corporate environment can expose you to things that will only help you in your startup. Not the structure, because again, big versus small, but that those business basics that will allow you to be more successful.
Yeah, I mean, we also know that there are, and I agree with you, there are plenty of very successful startups and companies that are, well known, that people that did not have business backgrounds or did not start in corporate America. The question there is who you surround yourself with, and frankly, what your role is in that startup. And I think that's really so critical. I mean, we were talking about this earlier before this podcast, and I still say to you that anyone that's either in a startup right now, or thinking about starting a business, or a startup that's getting to the next level, the leadership part of your job and building an organization and culture is just as critical as going to market and expanding your client base. They're really critical components. And frankly, in any size company, I think one of the biggest challenges is people don't think of leadership itself as a profession.
Oh my gosh.
And it has to be, because you're not going to be successful if you don't develop your craft as a leader, and frankly understand what leadership is for you. Because there's no such thing as one leadership profile, right? You have to factor in your own style, your own personality, your own background, your own skill set, to be able to understand what leadership is for you.
I couldn't agree more. And I feel like my role in this is going to be expanding on concepts you share when I ask a question. But the leadership piece specifically, we might have talked about this a little bit earlier upstairs. I've always been surprised that folks have this misguided belief that leadership is an innate thing that they're born with. Nothing could be further from the truth. It's like anything else, a skill you develop. In your secondary point about authenticity, when the chips are down and things are hard, or the inverse, things are going exceptionally well, the real you shows through. And if that's different than what people have come to see you when you're leading them, you're going to have a problem.
Yeah, I also think there's a misnomer in terms of, it's like almost like well, let me not even go in that direction. But I think the misnomer for a lot of people is, well, I don't have the right personality to lead. And I think that's a huge, challenge and mistake by people to have that mindset. You have to take a step back and say that inclusive of my personality and style, including if I'm more reserved and introverted, or if I'm not that outgoing, or if I'm not that assertive, especially for a lot of founders, as we know, that they come out of either scientific or technology backgrounds. And the reason, as you and I have talked about, they start that business, their passion for building something, for providing a solution to the marketplace, right? But you can still be an effective leader, but you have to understand how to be situationally effective. Yes. Often I'm asked, what is that secret sauce? And it's not one simple thing. It's really a formula. And frankly, my book gets into that pretty thoroughly. We really provide a roadmap on what all those attributes and skills and knowledge and strategies of leader you need to have. Again, inclusive of what kind of personality you have. But first of all, understand yourself, right? Understand the experiences that have shaped who you are as a person, in addition to your style and personality. So it's a pretty in-depth approach. And we've all had our experiences, especially if you've had leadership experiences in the past. I mean, trust me, and I say this even in my book, I was one of those managers and leaders that had issues. I needed help. I needed feedback. I was not effective when I was younger in my leadership journey. So, I got, fortunately, some great feedback, some tough feedback that I had to make a decision on, and that became a very transformational stage in my career. So, to your point, yeah, we're not born as leaders, and feedback is critical. Understanding yourself, and frankly, investing in that for yourself.
100% agree. Tell me if you've heard this story before. So I left the Marines. I was a sergeant in the Marine Corps, did signals intelligence. One of my earlier jobs was a technical recruiter. I had some success at that. Moved on to technology sales. Had some success at that. My branch manager pulled me aside and said, "Hey, you're doing well. I think you could lead one of the teams here. How would you feel about that?" I said, "That sounds great. I'd love to do it." She said, "I thought you'd say that," handed me a box of business cards that said sales manager, and that was the beginning and ending of my sales training. Sales management training, excuse me.
Sure.
So I went out to the floor, introduced myself to my team, and proceeded to treat them like young Marines.
Right.
That went about as well as you'd think it would. And unsurprisingly, I was hiring salespeople not too long after that.
Right.
And I say it with a laugh now, but it wasn't funny then because I ruined 4 employees. I did a poor job in the beginning, and I hurt the company because of my ineffectiveness. And again, I can laugh about it now, but when I look back, so many people are set up to fail because that branch manager assumed that I could lead because I could sell.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great story. We all have a story, especially for those of us that didn't have the right development or didn't have the right mentorship or the right guidance or didn't give it or given feedback, right? So, and I think for anyone that's out here, again, our focus here with startups is please invest in your leadership capability, understand yourself and what kind of leader you are, and frankly, make leadership a high priority in your
100%.
effectiveness to build a business because. The connection is leadership to culture, to your external and internal brand, right? Your employee experience is your culture, and how you going to define that. What's your strategy for that? And that's what leadership's driving. And in addition to your strategy and go to market and how you scale. So yes, that connection to leadership, to engagement, to culture, to overall performance. I mean, so one of the things I'll tell you, and this is important for anyone that's either in a startup or scaling or thinking about it, your connection to how engaged your workforce is, regardless of how big or small you are as an organization, has a direct correlation to how your financial performance. There's research now for over 25 years that demonstrates time and time again, no matter what your industry is, that the more engaged your workforce is, the higher financial performance. The lower engaged workforce is, the lower your financial performance. Because why? Engagement drives performance, drives productivity. What drives engagement? Leadership, culture. So your focus on leadership and culture are literally 2 of your most critical strategies as a business.
I completely agree. And, it's interesting because quiet quitting, quiet vacations, those have been terms that have been bandied about really for the last couple of years, I think,
right.
In part because quite obviously it's true, but secondarily because a new generation entered the workforce and our national pastime is denigrating the generation entering the workforce.
Right.
So it was an opportunity not to be missed. But those things, and I write about it often on LinkedIn, those things are symptoms of disengaged workforce. Why are they disengaged? Because you as a leader have failed to engage them. In my own book, Destination and Employer, I talk about the EFG leadership framework: engage, fulfill, and grow. Make sure that you're speaking with your people so you feel heard and valued. Make sure when you're attracting them and recruiting them that their personal mission and values and goals align with the corporate ones so that there's synergy there. And then finally, ensure that there's the opportunity for them to grow their skills and responsibilities so they have the reason to be there every day. When you do those 3 things, you're going a long way in the right way. And it's very basic, very straightforward. But the key to it, and you talked about it earlier in your leadership piece, is being an authentic leader so that trust can build. Because with your business experience, I'm sure that you know this, no one's going to openly engage with you if they don't feel comfortable that information is going to be used for a good thing. The first time they feel punished by the information they share will be the last time that they share that information with you.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the word trust. I mean, that's we can go down that pretty deeply, but no, because trust actually, out there in the business world and the leadership space is really a hot topic right now because. Yes, authenticity is important, but your ability to be situationally effective and adjusting your style is a reflection of that. And sometimes people confuse that with, well, that's being a chameleon or being manipulative. No, it's not. It's about understanding your audience and how to be effective with your audience. And that to me is one of the most critical components. But trust itself it's about caring. We are in a world today that, and you're right, we tend to bash the new generation. And frankly, as a father, now I'm getting to my age, but as a father of the
We're in the same boat, my friend.
As a father of having the new generation in the workforce, and I have several. I have 4 children, and several are in the workforce.
Same.
And I'm very proud of them because I see how hard they work and how effective they are, and their ability to be good communicators and good team players, and really dedicated to their profession and looking for mentorship and all those things. So I think every generation we tend to bash the new generation. I frankly think this generation is as talented as we've ever seen, and it's our opportunity to be able to develop them and to create that right work environment. But trust, again, going back to trust, I think trust is such it's simple, but it's complex. And the complexity is, trust is, yes, is it about authenticity? But it's also about caring.
Yes.
And I think, if you're going through the motions because you're focusing on performance and you're focusing on goals and objectives and deliverables and metrics and progress and achieving what the business needs or what my manager or my boss is telling me, yes, those are all factors. But you need to care and demonstrate you care about them, not just as a professional, as a member of your team, but as a person. And I think that's really one of the biggest changes coming out of COVID, frankly, is that organizations have to demonstrate, and as managers and leaders, we have to demonstrate we actually care about our people. I say with pride that, my core team, most of them have been with me over 10 years. And I think because we work hard at demonstrating and living what we talk about, right? What we provide in the marketplace. And you have to walk the talk. And
100%.
Caring about people is a factor. Being transparent with people. Really focusing on the relationship. We get so caught up in the day-to-day or meetings, the hybrid workforce we live in today. We have to develop relationships with people. We have to get to know them. We have to understand what motivates and drives them, what keeps them awake at night, what they're concerned about, what they're stressed out about. So our ability to establish trust is really critical at any level. And I can tell you, for someone who works with executive teams, often trust is a factor because how they make decisions, how transparent they are, their ability to really kind of understand, who that person is and what their journey is and what their challenges and issues are and concerns, is a really, really, and I'm not trying to oversimplify because it's more complex than that. But to your point, trust is a really, really critical piece to have effective relationships, period.
I'm a strong believer that any concept should be boiled down to its simplest place. Because number one, it shows a clarity of thinking. Number two, it becomes easier to adopt. I think trust is something that really benefits from that. So trust is just letting people know the way you believe things are in the moment and showing them over time that you care about their outcomes. I talk about this often. An example I give, so many years ago, I had hired a new salesperson, and as I always do, when we're sitting down for the first time in their new hire orientation, asking them, what are you looking to accomplish? What are your goals? What do you want to do? And he said, I'm recently married. I'd like to buy a house as soon as possible with my wife. We want to start a family. So he was in a sales role. So we sat down and we went through what I needed him to do through the lens of him earning what he needed to for the down payment. Fast forward a year, I was invited to the housewarming party. My many reviews over that period, instead of talking about, so Chuck, you need to make X calls to get Y meetings, to get Z outcome, we talked about where do we stand with your down payment? What have you done that's gotten you closer? How are you achieving that? Is that manipulative? From a cynical view, I suppose you could say that. But from my view, I took what I needed and I packaged it in what that person wanted to get out of their role here. Mm-hmm. Not only did they get their house in a year, but they were salesmen of the year and they excelled in that career. They did an amazing job there.
Right.
Why? Because he knew I cared about his outcome.
Right, and that's a great example of that. I think the more we can understand what goes back to what motivates and drives, what that person's outcome, what their ambition is, what success is for them, taking the time to listen, taking the time to spend time to understanding that person, and as we're talking about here, and slowing down to be able to do that. I mean, it's such. Again, we're in a world that is fast paced. It's getting faster, and our ability to slow down and not just be in meetings all day long and spend time with our people. That's some of the biggest advice I would give to anyone out there, no matter how long you've been managing. Spend time with your people. You have to do that. Cultivate that relationship, build trust, and more importantly, be that mentor. Be a good listener. Ask questions. Too many managers are out there still dictating, and
Yes.
and that's just not going to work in the world that we live in today. And the other equation that I think I would really spend time quickly here for anyone that's managing, especially people that have a lot of expertise that have already had some great success. Be humble.
Yes.
Be genuine. I don't care how much expertise you have and how successful you've been financially. Be genuine, be humble, treat people no matter what level they are and how much expertise they have, and frankly, how even good or not good of a performer they are. Because not everyone's operate at the same level or at the same speed. Treat people with respect and compassion and empathy and care, and you will be successful no matter what your situation is.
Teams are like habits. You build a habit over time by consistently doing something. And then once that thing becomes a habit, that habit makes you through the output of what you do in that habit. And teams are the same way. You pour your energy into building a team, and then that team builds you. And the higher you climb in leadership, the more true that becomes. The less direct control you have over your success, and the more that your success is a manifestation of your team's success.
Yeah, and I'm happy you're mentioning teams, just because it brings to mind something that, again, because it's a society challenge today, which obviously seeped into our work environment, which is conflict, right? We
I had
we have
noticed.
become very conflict. Yeah, right. I'm just going to pick one thing. I'm not going to get into everything, but one thing I will talk about is we as a society, as we know, especially here in the U.S., have become very conflict averse, right? We walk on eggshells. We're afraid to insult people. We're afraid to go against the norm or what we think are the majority in terms of what they think. And that in itself has all kinds of implications and challenges and problems, frankly. But in the business world we live in, we have to create an environment for our teams, and frankly, no matter how big or small your team is, we want our teams to challenge the status quo. We want them to feel they have a voice. We want them to feel they can say, "Why are we doing it that way?" "Well, I disagree," and why they disagree. So we have to create an environment where people feel comfortable and empowered, that they have a voice, they can challenge, they can disagree, and frankly, they can also make a mistake. And we've become such a risk adverse, don't challenge, just do your job. And again, if you're trying to be an innovative startup, let's tie this back into why we're here today.
For sure.
You have to create an environment where people feel they can challenge and there can be healthy conflict. Yes, there is unhealthy conflict. So I'm not here advocating all levels of conflict, but you have to create healthy conflict. You have to give people the freedom to do that, and frankly, the freedom to fail. And that's sometimes a hard concept in business, right? Because failure can equate to losing a client, losing money, not being in the business. So there's obviously different levels of failure, but we all forget that without failure, we don't learn.
Yeah, there's no growth.
Right? I'll give you two examples if we have a couple more minutes here.
Oh, please.
So let me give it, because people like stories, right? You've given a couple of good stories. Let me share. So I have two different examples around failure and innovation. So one is a very successful, globally well-known consumer products company where I worked with the CEO, and I know this company very well. And believe it or not, they were challenged in terms of new products, and they really wanted to have a greater focus on innovation. So they created an innovation, a center of excellence, a head of innovation. They created innovation teams throughout the organization, not just in terms of new product development, but operations, everything internally for efficiency, and obviously to generate new product for new consumers. The challenge was, and this is a very, very respectable, very, very sharp CEO, but he was essentially risk adverse. And even though he knew he had to drive innovation, they launched a product, and that product did not get off the ground quickly. So it kind of staggered out of the gate, basically. And, he essentially was and he got, obviously there's a lot of pressure, by investors, the marketplace, Wall Street, competition, the board. They name all these factors, But frankly, he pulled the plug on the product because it just didn't launch as quickly as it could. It's debatable whether he pulled it too quickly or not. But most importantly, how he responded. How he responded was, firing a few people, really addressing performance issues, and really send a message that this was a complete failure and people, were going to be held accountable and losing jobs and people were obviously was not a good experience within the company. The challenge with that, and it's always easy to look backwards, right? Hindsight's 2020. The problem with that, the message is this: if you fail,
Yes.
you're going to either lose your job or you're going to not just get slapped, you're going to get demoted or you're going to get, put on a performance plan or your career here is basically over or it's stalled. And the message, unfortunately, to the whole organization was, including people you're trying to hire to generate innovation,
Succeed or die.
you may not want to come here because if it's not a home run out of the gate, you're gonna fail. And so, so what did it do? Of course, it sucked innovation completely out of the company and demoralized the whole company, not just this group of people. And it was unfortunate because the CEO ended up moving on, and a new CEO came in to try to rejuvenate this company. So it's a long story. Let me give you another example. Opposite. Go ahead. Okay, you have a question.
Yeah, I want to talk about that for a minute because it ties into a couple things that we've talked about. One is trust. Obviously, that's easy.
Yeah.
But another part of the conflict-averse culture that we've devolved to is a lack of ability to have nuanced conversation.
Right.
So you have one political view, I have another. We're just enemies. We can't talk through similarities and differences. That extends to the workplace in that I feel that we've become something of a post-trust culture. So when people come to us, they're starting from no trust. Whereas at risk of profiling you, I think we're a similar age. When we grew up, there was a trust for authority, a basic level of trust that person had to lose. Whereas we're starting at zero and have to build. And I think that has to be paid attention to.
No, I don't disagree with that. I mean, so trust is a factor here, but it's also, frankly, a philosophy and a tolerance to failure and mistakes.
Yes.
And what message you're going to send when there is failure. Now, you could make an argument that was a pretty highly visible, high-impact failure, but I think the question, without going too deep into this, is what was the response? And without debating, was the trigger pulled too early? Because most people would say was pulled too early because of the risk aversion, and of course there's a financial impact and so on. But let me give you another example,
Please.
Just for the sake of this, and for anyone who's listening to this, and this whole issue around conflict and innovation. So, and obviously failure and mistakes. So, happens to be a high-tech company, software development company. And this team, customer service team, made up of customer-facing software engineers, probably about half a dozen people. And these are actually two real examples. These are not hypothetical. This example, actually, believe it or not, is a business school case study. And I'm just going to give the high-level, situation. So this team basically was trying to solve a customer issue and problem, and essentially bombed, and had a big financial impact to this company, and it's not a big company, small mid-sized firm, and I can say that the customer was not only happy, they lost most of the business in the customer. They didn't lose the customer completely, but it was pretty visible, high impact within the company. So the CEO would do town halls, would bring everyone into their, whatever it was, their auditorium or whatever space they had where they can fit a few hundred people. And at that moment, the CEO pulled out a checkbook and wrote a bonus check to every single person on that team, commending them for their effort and hard work to try to innovatively solve the problem, even though it didn't work. But because of their effort and their commitment and their dedication, he wrote, literally in front of everyone, wrote them a bonus check and handed them bonus checks.
I love that.
And of course, standing ovation, people were just jazzed, and he sent a message, right? Same team, 6 to 9 months later, came up with a new innovative solution for their software that not only that expanded their business exponentially, but generated multiple millions of dollars of revenue and profitability for the company. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen every single time, but there's a couple of things that happen here. Even though again, there's different degrees of we all have levels of tolerance around risk and failure, and that in itself is a debatable question. But more importantly, he sent a very critical message, which is, I appreciated your dedication, your commitment, your hard work in trying to solve and try to be innovative. It didn't work, but that's what I want here. That's what's important to me here, and I'm going to reward and recognize that. Why? Because it's going to motivate your people and everyone in that company to try hard and realize that if I'm going to fail and make a mistake, I'm not going to only lose my job, I'm not going to get beaten up. And more importantly, I'm going to get encouraged to keep on going ahead moving forward. So two different examples, but again, to me, it's the relationship between failure and risk and trust and innovation. And why that, and again, if you're in a startup environment, why it's so critical to create a work environment that does that.
So what a tale of two cities. So in our meandering journey, we've kind of touched, I think, three central themes are trust, leadership, and culture. And an interesting thing that those highlight to me, and this is kind of a macro view, I'll admit,
Sure.
Is what people saw based on what happened. Not even what the actual event was, but what the team or the rest of the company from an outside-in perspective saw in those teams and what they undoubtedly took away from that and what they could expect if they experienced something similar. And I think that that's a powerful piece. I feel like we're telling a lot of stories, we're showing our age. But back in the 90s, do you by any chance remember there's a popular TV show called The X-Files?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I forget the man's last name, but the executive producer was Chris, not Claremont, Chris whatever. So he started the show, and he didn't have the budget that he needed to have the special effects. For those of you not aware of it, it's kind of a Monster of the Week type of show about conspiracies and government cover-ups and stuff. Ironically, it'd probably be popular today too.
Right.
But he didn't have the budget to make the scary monsters he wanted, and he didn't want it to be silly. There's nothing worse than the reveal, and it's a silly rubber-suited gorilla mask monster. It
Right.
ruins the whole show.
Right.
So what he did was lots of late-night running through the woods, flashlight / scenes, so that the audience would only see just a glimpse for a fraction of a second of the monster. And what did they do every time? They filled in what was scariest for them. And I tell this story because in the business world, the same thing happens. The CEO comes out, makes a quick cryptic message, no follow-on information, no continuing communication plan, and that team fills in the scary piece for themselves. They never fill in the positive. They fill in some scary, we're being sold, we're being shut down, we're whatever. And in the stories you told, I can imagine the takeaway from the team in the first company versus the team in the second company.
Yeah, I love. Even if this audience has no idea what the X-Files are,
You missed out.
I think your point is really, really well taken. I hope people really internalize that, which is again, tell the story, tell the full picture, whether it's the examples we give, but don't let people's imagination take over, and that ties into engagement. People need to understand their role and their responsibilities and their objectives and what success is for them and how that's connected to the overall purpose and vision and the success of the organization. And that's not a one-time conversation. And that's multiple conversations with everybody, not just with individuals and teams, your whole organization. And that has to happen on a constant basis. And again, why? That's always been the case. But now more important than ever. Why? Because the world is constantly changing, right? The marketplace is constantly changing. Our customer demands and consumers' needs and interests are constantly changing. So that this whole notion of alignment and communication and understanding is something that has to happen on a constant basis.
And the communication needs to support that because as the leader, you have access to information that other people don't. And gosh, this goes back to both of our days as consultants. What's Consulting 101? Set an expectation, manage the expectation, communicate effectively throughout. If you as the CEO or leader or founder are creating a new workflow or implementing a new whatever, that team is going to take something away from that. And it might not be what you intended. But if you effectively communicate through that implementation, through that change in workflow, you're going to avoid a lot of the ugliness. But most importantly, to your point about change, you're gonna mitigate the damage because people hear again and again the same message or the evolving message if things change in flow, which happens so often. One of the things I talk so often with leaders about is that they need to communicate more often than they think they should. If they feel like they're always talking to their teams, that they're not getting things done because they're always communicating, they're probably right about where they should be.
I agree.
Well, that was disagree, so let's fight it out. First of all, I definitely want to have you on the show again.
Okay.
But secondly, I think we have a lot of similar views, which might make for a less riveting episode, but a lot to learn. So circling back from a startup perspective, I think all of the things were described apply from 2 people in the company to Fortune 100. But from a startup perspective, the thing I think we need to really elevate the awareness of is the rate of change. Because in a startup, your team structure, everything, heck, when I first started Redbeard Solutions, my ICP was wholly different than what it is now. Why? Because as I communicated with my clients and prospects, I realized I was targeting the wrong place. My offering has evolved significantly over the years. Why? Because as I worked with more and more clients, it became clear that there was a hole here or maybe too much focus there. And as those changes occurred, the way that my teams are structured changed. Why? Because the product did.
Right.
And those changes, they happen so much in the beginning. If you're not effectively communicating, you will erode what trust you've managed to build. And once trust is gone, again, I feel like I'm just spitting colloquialisms now, but all business success is built on 2 pillars, or long-term business success. That's success and trust. Success has to be there, or else there's no reason to have the relationship, and trust has to be there.
Well, again, going back to the startup focus, there's 2 things I would also add on that, for what we've talked about so far, which is another biggest challenge is how do we deal with performance, right? And
Yes.
I can tell you in all the years I've been doing this, and every leader and every CEO I've ever worked with, including all the founders that I still work now, and owners and entrepreneurs and CEOs, to a T, we will all say, and I'm talking about me as well, by the way, in terms of my hires and the people that have not worked out, is no one has ever said I moved too quickly on someone that's not a good fit. And they're not a good fit for 2 reasons. They're just not able to do the job effectively, or they're just not a good cultural fit, right? In terms of how you define what your culture is. They just don't fit in your organization. They don't represent the right values, whatever they may be. So again, for all you founders and CEOs out there, address your non-performers or people that just don't fit your culture sooner than later. Not to say don't rush them out or kick them out the door. Treat them with respect and kindness, just like you would any employee, because your employees are paying attention how you deal with non-performance and how you deal with people who don't fit your organization culture as well, by the way. So treating them with respect and kindness is just as important, but don't wait. It's not going to go away.
Agree.
And listen to your gut and your instincts and put your process together that's going to address that quickly and have, some, frankly, courageous dialogue and conversation with those people. No one should be shocked when you're saying, hey, it's not working out.
Yes.
If they're shocked, that means you weren't doing your job.
Either you're not doing your job or they were delusional,
Yeah,
which is
and
probably not
99%
likely.
99% it's you're not doing your
100%
job.
agree.
Okay? Not to say the delusion
100%
doesn't
agree.
exist. It does. But the delusion is built by the fact you haven't addressed the problem or the issue, right? So that's one thing. And the other, especially now, let's go externally. Don't get too internally focused. You have to stay connected to the marketplace. And don't just rely on your sales force and your marketing people. As a founder, as a CEO, be market focused. What's going on in the marketplace? What's the competition doing? But what's going on with your customers? Talk to your customers. Your customers are going to give you the best feedback about not only your product and services, but also what's missing, what they need, what they're not getting. So stay connected to the marketplace. Don't be too internally focused. So that's 2 other pieces of advice I would give to anyone out there.
Completely agree. And I've hired literally thousands of people over the years. And I will say, from the highest mountain I can find, there are infinitely more bad matches than there are bad candidates and bad clients, bad companies. And
Right.
to your point, if you wait too long, the only thing you're doing is hurting your team. Everybody knows when a person isn't working out. And one of the things I've found that adopting really helps everyone with is being clear from the beginning. Look, Chuck, as a new hire, I'm going to give you 100% of my support unless it becomes clear, or up until the point it becomes clear that you either can't do the job that you're hired to do or won't do the job that you're hired to do.
Right.
If either of those things is identified, every minute after that is robbing you of the opportunity to find a place where you will thrive. And it's robbing my team of a teammate that's going to help them thrive. So again, it's not a decision I make lightly. I don't want to make that sound cavalier. But once it's clear, every minute after that is wasted time that's detrimental to everyone involved.
Mm-hmm. Yep, agree.
So let me ask you this. Give us the title of your book again.
It's called The Rise of the Agile Leader. Can you make the shift?
And where can people find it?
Multiple places, but probably the easiest would be Amazon.
Amazon is
right.
everyone's biggest frenemy.
I hear that. You can't get it at bookstores. That you can get it pretty much in online retailers as well, but Amazon's probably the easiest. Anyone that wants to connect with me, has any questions, they can find me on LinkedIn. It's Chuck Mollar, Mollor.
Yes, and as always, for folks or listening to the show, Chuck's information will be in our show notes. And I thank you for being on it. And it wasn't a hollow offer. I'd love to have you back on. I feel like you and I could talk daily for months and not run out of topics.
I agree, Jerry. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me here.
Thank you again for being here, and thank you very much for Suffolk University for hosting us, for Boston Startup for putting on this incredible event. And until next time, have a great time building your companies, folks.